This is Creatives Incorporated. We take a look at the process and inspiration of creators. I'm Travis, your host, a location sound mixer and commercial photographer based in Pensacola, Florida. Today is Quarantine Special 1 with special guest Joe Hernandez. Joe is a director, actor, singer, and educator who has a passion about creating theater that matters. In his 20-plus years in professional theater, Joe has directed, acted, and stage managed regionally and internationally with companies like Ohio Light Opera, Children's Theater of Charlotte, The Lost Colony, and the International Performing Arts Institute. In 2019, Joe started JMH Media, a digital branding and print design company that specializes in website design for theater and opera artists, as well as nonprofits and small businesses. Currently, Joe is a professor of theater arts at Ouachita Baptist University. How are you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about being here with you today, Travis. It's good.
Are you doing good?
Yeah. I'm doing well. It's been an adjustment to the new normal with, being in quarantine, but finding new ways to be creative, both individually and with my students. But yeah, how about yourself?
I'm good, and you bring up a good point. Depending on when our audience is listening to the show, some things might seem out of date. So for reference, we're recording this on April 10th, 2020. And here's hoping the world is a better place soon. But to start off, what have you been doing to keep busy during social distancing?
Yeah, honestly, so between my company and then teaching, I have created this kind of makeshift office in our master bedroom. And so I have had meetings with clients for my company that has kind of kept me somewhat busy, but as with everybody else, with everything going on, things have slowed down. And so it's been kind of minor adjustments. And then teaching, I'm doing all my classes on Zoom right now. And, that's been challenging. There's been some adjustments. I was working actually late last night, to put together, adjust our online education platform that we use. It's called Moodle. And just having to update just classes and things of that nature. But I mean, I've kept busy, but the biggest thing that has kept me busy, honestly, is I have a 2-year-old. He'll be 3 in a couple of weeks, and his name's Grayson, and he has kept us on our toes, going nonstop. And so that's been, the thing that's probably kept us busy the most.
And obviously trying to work and teach with a 2-year-old around has got to be incredibly difficult. Besides Grayson, has anything been particularly difficult to you during this time? Has it been like the switch to teaching online, the lack of being there with your students? I mean, there's got to be a distance challenge when you're teaching theater.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Yeah, it has been. So I teach a lot of the upper level classes at Ouachita, and those being directing, acting for, what's my other class? Oh, and I'm teaching a dramatic theory and playwriting class. That one hasn't been as much of a challenge just because of the nature of it. It's a lot of writing. And so, it hasn't been a big adjustment, but the directing class and the acting for, I've had to restructure the entire curriculum to accommodate this, which has been not only challenging for myself, but more so for my students. That, for the directing class, they put a 1 act at the end of every semester, and now they won't get to. And so I am somebody that, I think the best way to describe me is just an empathetic educator. And so when they're hurting, I'm hurting for them. And I hated seeing their disappointment. As an educator, we want our students not only to learn from failures, but also to succeed through hard times. And right now, they just, they can't create the art that they're wanting to create. And then they face challenges with their cast, with the 1 acts that they had cast. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely an adjustment. I mean, even yesterday, we were supposed to do kind of a live on Zoom, the acting for class, do monologues, and there were technical difficulties. So then it was like, all right, let's readjust. Let's upload these to Vimeo or to YouTube. Send me the links. I can watch them and respond. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been challenging. But for me, I try to encourage all my students to remember that, 1, we'll come out of this on the other side, and 2, not only will we come out of it, but I believe that we're going to come out of it stronger. And so that's kind of trying to find the hope within everything that's going on.
Are any of the current students that you're teaching, since you're teaching those upper level classes, do you have any seniors that are affected?
Absolutely, yeah. I have quite a few actually. There was, at least in my classes, probably about 20 between all the classes that are seniors, and it's so challenging for them because not only do they not get to have their senior year, the end of their senior year, that all entails a final, musical that they had been working on and looking forward to that doesn't get to go up. Many of them had contracts to work professionally after they graduated, and I would go as far as to say that 90% of them have been canceled. And so these students who had been working 4 years to work towards the professional world are now leaving and have nothing, honestly, to go to right now, and so they're very discouraged. And many of them are, getting depressed, and they're like, where's the other side of this? And so one of the things that I've been doing to encourage those seniors and just all my students is I've been very fortunate to connect and network with a ton of people in my years of working. And so I'm bringing in Broadway actors, Tony nominee people, Broadway producers, etc., that can just do his live Zoom. And I brought in a film guy that I met years ago that just as a reminder to them, one, to give them information, but two, to remind them that, hey, they are out of work too. And people on Broadway, like one of the big names like Audra McDonald or Patti LuPone, they're filing for unemployment just like the people, their age, right? And so it kind of puts it in perspective, and really for them, it's made them feel a little bit better.
Do you have any words of advice possibly for any listener that's in a similar situation?
I think the thing that I keep telling not just my students, but myself and for anybody else is that we've, at least in my generation, have overcome challenging times, right? And so I am 38 years old, and I was in college when 9/11 happened. And I remember the impact that it had, not just on the nation, but I think the world as a whole. And my encouragement to my students, many of my students who are graduating, or were either very little or had just been born during 9/11. And that was probably the last big thing that happened to our nation. And I send them to those moments in time and say, look at how our nation came together. Look at the strength that we found and how we persevered together as a community, as a nation. And so my encouragement is to anybody that's out there listening, I think, remember that there's light at the end of the tunnel. As cliche as that sounds, we will overcome this. I have to believe that. I have to believe that we are going to come out the other side, and that great things are in store, and I tell my students that are younger, that are like, man, I'm just getting started. Just remember just that you're just getting started, and you have a long career ahead of you. And I believe that, if you work hard and you persevere through this and the other challenges that you ensure will face, you're going to come out just a better human being. And I think more appreciative for the work that you are able to create in the future.
So you're one of the people I know who might have a sense of this, and you'd brought up Broadway. So, theater has that famous mantra of the show must go on. But even with the pandemic, even the Broadway League had to kind of acquiesce and close. A couple of days ago, they announced plans to reopen on June 7th. What's kind of the overall feeling in the theater community these days?
Yeah, great question. I was talking to a couple of friends of mine that are on Broadway right now, and the feel is very somber. They had originally made the date, I think it was April 17th, to come back. And as you mentioned, they pushed it back to June 7th. It's affected a lot of people. I think many of them, something that it has been a big topic of conversation recently, even before this happened, has been just mental health in our community and in the nation, but being aware of it and being okay to talk about it. And I think what I'm finding is two things within the community is when they are down, whether it's a director or an actor, that is feeling down, they are reaching out and they are using technology to encourage them, because the reality is we're all in the same boat and you're not alone. There's a great piece from a song from Dear Evan Hansen, a musical that won the Tony Award a couple of years ago, but it talks about mental health, and it says you will be found, and it's essentially it's a reminder you're not alone in this world, and that we will get through this together. And then the other side of, with the Broadway community and just the theater community in general, is that we are finding ways to still create, both individually and together. And so you'll see things on YouTube and even national television, for that matter, of like recently, I have a friend of mine that's on the national tour of Hamilton, and the Hamilton cast got together, via Zoom, and put together this like recording of one of the main song of it. And then Dear Evan Hansen did the same thing, and beautiful. I have another former student who's actually was in the Broadway production of Beautiful, the Carole King musical. And I say all that to say that while the theater community is aware of the challenges that we are facing, right? We are finding a way to come together and finding hope within each other.
Do you have any thoughts on Broadway shows opening in early June? I mean, not as a medical professional, but is it too early to make that kind of call, or do you think that there's some hope with that kind of, intention?
Yeah, I do my best to balance between reading the news and then kind of keeping away from it. And I read an article yesterday on the New York Times that that they felt in New York, particularly, that the curve was kind of flattening. And that was April 9th. So it gives us roughly 2 months to get to that June date. And I honestly don't know. I am of the mindset it's better to be safer than sorry, because especially after everything that's gone on in New York City right now, New Jersey, Connecticut, that area, this pandemic has affected them so much. And when I saw the statistics and how the United States has, surpassed China, and I think we're close to surpassing Italy if we haven't already. I think that they chose the date as an opportunity to say, let's provide hope with the mindset of, if we to reevaluate this, we will. And I have a feeling, come probably 2 to 3 weeks in, before that date, they'll make the decision, okay, yeah, either A, we're good to go, or B, we need to extend it longer. My personal opinion is I don't think that we will be out of this by then. And I think it's going to be closer to an August date before we can have people in a theater that close to each other. Because if for anyone out there that's never been in a Broadway theater, the seats are so tiny and tight. Think about like if you were in a high school auditorium and you were sitting in there, you could easily condense it probably about 4 to 5 inches, which in theory you think that's not a big deal, but when you cram everybody in, it's like a bunch of sardines. And so it is really tight and in close-knit quarters. So I worry that, you're going to make the spread happen again if you don't wait for everything to die down.
Now, I keep thinking on, like you said, all these Broadway casts are kind of getting together doing these recordings online. Live streaming has exploded with teaching and presenting and entertainment. I've wondered if, the way we were adapting during COVID-19 and having kind of a alternate model for business in place is going to result in some permanent changes to either the way we do theater or education in the future. With your perspective, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you, Travis. I think some colleagues that I have, colleagues/friends that teach at other universities across the country, there's a meme that was out there that early on is, our bosses or whatever are going to finally realize that, what could have been done, or what was asked to be done in a meeting could have been done via email. And I think the reality is we are being forced to reevaluate the way that we do business, I think, in every capacity. And I think that there will be good that will come from this, because when you look at how many, I'm just thinking in the education world, right? We are in meetings more than sometimes than you're in the classroom. I mean, just to give you perspective, for me, I'm on a technology committee. I'm in a School of Fine Arts committee. I have a department meeting. I have a production meeting, and this is typically it's weekly. And so there's a lot of meetings that you're in. What if you come to a point that you are able to communicate either via email or jumping on a Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, platform that you decide to use, it's at your phone, right? And so you could have this meeting anywhere that you are, which gives you more time with family, more time for your students, and more time ultimately for yourself. And I think that I'm actually excited about it because it opens up doors to get things done, and I think a faster way. The reality is I've unfortunately, come across, I'm kind of jumbling because I'm trying to find the right words to how to describe it. But I was in DC recently. I have a friend of mine who's an equity actor in the DC area, and we were at lunch and we were having a conversation about we call it the new guard and the old guard. And the new guard is this kind of younger, fast-paced, finding new and creative ways to create ultimately and communicate. And then there's the old guard that has done things a certain way for a very long time, and their way was transformative when they took over. And they do things that are the foundation for over the last. It would go as far as there's some artistic directors for the last 60 years, right? And what we're finding is that this shift to communicating via, some video platform or via email is going to be beneficial. It's going to help, I think, ultimately bring more money in, and it's going to open doors for actors that can't make it to New York, to LA, whatever the case may be, to submit videos and be considered for these national tours and things of that nature. I really see a lot of positive coming from this. Now, it could be that I'm one of the younger guard, if you will, and I make a living a lot of times, using technology. But I also just think it's, as the world and society advances, we have to advance with it. Otherwise, we're going to get left behind. And anyways, it was a long kind of response to
I love
the
it.
idea that,
Yeah, no, and I kind of agree. I wonder, and I have no idea how realistic this is, but I like imagining that possibly, obviously couldn't do this now just because with cast and crew it would be, way too many people together. But in the future, the possibility of opening up theater and kind of taking not a multi-camera approach, but just even a single camera approach, like you're in the audience, but like live streaming a Broadway show like it's a pay-per-view. Or having, online coursework be more prominent for distance learning. I think we're going to see the establishment of online and live streaming moving forward as more of a mature tool, as instead of an accessory tool like we've seen it up till now. I think it's going to be more one of the standard practices.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that, just thinking about the education side of things, schools like Liberty University, University of Phoenix, there's another one that I can't think of off the top of my head, but my point is they have a lot of online degrees. Their revenue that they make from that is insane. If you were to go and look at the numbers. And this pandemic really has opened the doors for universities that maybe were dragging their feet to implement the technology in a fast way because they didn't have a choice. And there are certifications out there that you can get to teach specifically online, like the University of Phoenix. I've looked into it. You have to go through a special kind of online certification course, but for most universities, you just got to be able to operate technology, right? And so this greatly increases the potential for revenue if they take advantage of it, because you can bring in students that normally wouldn't, and you can't do this for all degrees, right? But there's many degrees that you can just do everything online. And it's educating, the faculty to say, hey, here's how we are going to grow. This is a time where we need to find ways to continue to increase, my personal opinion, the revenue that's coming in. And if you can do that via the technology, why not take advantage of it? So, yeah.
Now, there is something I really wanted to ask you when I read about it. So there were some universities that had recordings of previous year's lectures on hand, and they seem to have had an easier time making the move to distance learning. How would you feel, though, about a university having a full year's lectures pre-recorded and on hand? On the one hand, I see the benefit, but if those recordings are properties of the university, I do wonder, once you as a faculty might leave, they essentially still have you as a teacher on file without compensation. So I don't know if that's a double-edged sword for those professors.
Yeah, I mean, I think it concerns me, for a few different reasons. They've asked us to record all of our Zoom sessions, and it goes in, but full transparency, I go in and I download mine to my own, device, and then I delete them from the cloud for two reasons. One, I think that I just don't, with the way technology is right now, there are hackers out there that could easily get access to this. And I just, if they want my class, fine, I get it, but I don't think it's that important. But I just don't want my information to be as easily accessible as others. But the idea is, you talk about like keeping records and files, there's obviously like the frustration of I'm not being compensated for the work that I produced, before. That said, I also think that it's a disadvantage to the student, right? And so if a student is paying, let's say, for a private university, it could range anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000, upwards of $100,000 a year, right? If you're like Princeton or Yale, they are paying for the as much of a one-on-one attention as they can get. But they want to feel like their money is going towards something that they're getting something immediately back. We're not robots, right? And we can't just say, oh, well, we've got these lectures from 2 years ago with this professor, that it was really transformative. We'll use it as an archive and another professor reference it and maybe show clips. But the idea, and I haven't read the article, but to the idea that potentially using it for an entire year's worth of work, I honestly think that's wrong to the students ultimately. Yes, the idea of me not being compensated, is one thing, and I get that. But I usually always care more about, how is this affecting the students? And I think that's just wrong to do to the students, in my opinion.
I think that's kind of a sense of why you're probably such a good educator. And switching gears a minute here, I want to hear a bit about JMH Media. Tell us a little bit about it, and then kind of what was the impetus to start a design and web-based business?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking about it. So I met a colleague who's now become a very good friend of mine, Dr. Corey Trahand, when I was in Europe teaching with the International Performing Arts. And I remember being there, and I had told my students, that I took with me when I went there to this particular summer intensive. Always be prepared, always have a good, website, resume, etc. This was always something I was, good at. Never, full transparency, never had any real training on it. I taught myself. Anyways, this colleague was like, hey, my students don't know this. It's not really offered. They don't talk about this. And this was roughly 5-6 years ago. And he said, when we get back to the States, I'd really love it if you would come out, teach a master class, etc. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So we did just that. I flew out, taught a master class one weekend, which then turned into they brought me out and I taught a full class on, I call it branding the artist. And from that, it just really kind of developed. And Corey, I really, I'm so thankful for him, because it's because of him that I even created JMH Media. I don't know that I've ever told him that. He would always be like, you need Joe. He's always been a big advocate for me. And companies, I have multiple opera companies. I have a corporation in Florida, the Miracle Strip Officials Association that I've built websites for. But all of it was just like, there is this need, and why not build it? And let me just state this. I'm a very basic coder, right? And again, no formal training, but I use a platform that allows me to just develop these graphic heavy and clean sites that are going to draw the eye and bring people in, but also want to, look around. And when I started the company itself almost a year ago, and I just realized I have this influx of customers that I keep building these things for. Let's just say that I have a company for multiple reasons. One, the tax purposes, but two, I thought, why not venture out and see, what happens? And immediately I had quite a few clients that just continued to grow, and bigger clients, bigger funding, budgets that they had to build things. And it's just been great because it has shown me that even though you were never formally trained in something, it doesn't mean you can't do it. And I never tell anybody that I am this amazing web designer, this coder, etc. What I am is I find a way to bring traffic to your website, and I market them and brand them in a way that they didn't know that they either A, needed to be, or B, they didn't know it was capable of being branded. And it's been fun. And additionally, I'm able to bring on students that maybe have a little bit of kind of artistic graphic design background, and I let them either A, I pay them, or I let them, work as an internship to develop resumes, or and I give them the software. Like my company covers the cost of it, because it always goes back to education for me, is how can I continue to help my students and those that are coming after me to continue to succeed and grow. And I use JMH Media as that tool as well. And it's just been exciting for me. Obviously the income, extra income has been nice, but honestly, I love connecting with these people. And, I have an opera company, 2 opera companies in Mississippi, companies in Florida, and then just artists literally all over the country. My company signed a contract with TCU, Texas Christian University, last fall, and we are the designer for both their print materials, resumes, CVs, logos, etc., and then their websites. And I met just some incredible people, and it's going to be an ongoing thing. And again, that came from Dr. Corey Trahan. He is there teaching now, and he was like, let's implement this. Let me bring in my friend, and I taught a masterclass, and it turned into this contract for the company. And so it's been really fun, and I'm really excited about where it goes in the future.
I think that's great. And we've got a bit of time left, so I kind of, the next topic I wanted to bring up, I kind of have left it so you have some room to answer, as long as you'd like to.
Sure.
And it's just something I want to give them a glimpse, not the full thing, not trying to give away your secrets. But so recently I had the pleasure of joining you at our high school alma mater, where you were presenting a masterclass to the theater students there. And so I have a couple of questions. One, what do you think were the takeaways those students took away from that afternoon?
The first was probably, this person sat in the same place that I'm sitting, and if he's gone off to work with Broadway producers, internationally direct, perform, etc., then I can do it too. One of the things about me, Travis, and this is probably where we were very different, is that I was not a good student in high school. I was very lazy. I barely graduated high school. And I tell them that. I tell these students that as you're referencing this masterclass that I had at our high school, I'm honest with them and said, look, it's not easy. One of the things with me is, it wasn't that I was incompetent. It was that I didn't want to apply myself. And in this industry, and in any industry for that matter, you have to be willing to do that. You got to do the work. You've got to pull the late nights. You've got to do the things that somebody else isn't willing to do, And my hope is that many of them walked away, with a little encouragement of saying, hey, Joe got out of here. We come from this small town, Crestview, Florida, that is honestly, I think growing up there was, maybe just a couple of stoplights at the time, when I was in elementary school. And for me, when I go back, it's very surreal. I hadn't been back there in years until, recently in December when you and I were there. And I was brought in because one of my former students that I taught in high school there, because I was a high school teacher there, brought me in, and she took over the program recently from somebody else. And I was so proud. And that is a testament in and of itself that, some of these students are impacted by teachers, right? Like myself and like my former student who's now their teacher. And as a reminder, you can do this, anything is possible. And so, yeah, I really hope that they walked away with some encouragement, and hope that regardless of circumstances, you can make it out and you can be successful in whatever you define success as.
I've rarely seen you so focused and passionate as when you were teaching those. Teaching and interacting with performers really does kind of seem to be your calling, Joe. And so this ties in a bit with that, recorded lecture from earlier, but have you ever considered teaching an online master course?
Has it crossed my mind? I think yes. As tech savvy as I am, I don't know where I would begin. It's interesting. Over the last probably year, I've really started doing a lot of research on mental health. One of my best friends, his name is Philip Searcy. He's a licensed social worker and counselor. He has a private practice, and he and I were at SCTC recently, which is the Southeastern Theater Conference, and we taught a masterclass titled "Mental Health and the Character Within Us." And I remember we got there, and this is going to tie back into just the online web platform thing, but we got there and we were kind of discouraged because we were like, we had made sure that we left ourselves open to just kind of reconnect with old people and network, things of that nature. Well, there was this app that SCTC had, and you could see how many people were registered for your masterclass. And we were like, oh, there's only 15. And so we arrived on a Wednesday, and by our masterclass on Friday, so this was 2 days later, we had 176 registered. And we were like, wow, we kind of gone into the other classes and, to see, well, does anybody else have this many? Was it just a fluke? And there was only one other course, their masterclass that was being offered that had that many registered. And then we get there the day of, and there's just this room. They had to actually add more chairs, this room full of people. And this gets to my point. As much as I love technology, I am such an in-person artist. I want to be there with you. I want to take the time to invest in you individually. I want you to feel like you're, important, right? And because I genuinely mean that. And so while I like the use of technology, I want there to be a personalization with it. When Philip and I finished our masterclass, we had a lot of people come up to us and say, hey, we want to bring you in. We actually, when this pandemic first hit, we have a professor from the University of Miami that I'm connected with. They have a BFA acting program there. It's a conservatory, and they were like, we want to bring you in. This was at SCTC, and then when this hit, he was like, hey, can I bring you in via Zoom and y'all talk? We've had, honestly, people from all over the country that have reached out to us for this, because mental health it affects so many of us, but there's been this stigma of we're afraid to talk about it. This goes back to my research that I was telling you about in the beginning, was that I started researching Brené Brown. She's a leading kind of, she's called a shame researcher, or shame research storyteller, I think is how she describes herself, but she's incredible. And I think I just butchered that, but she talks about, she did this podcast or TED Talk on vulnerability back in 2010 or 11. She's a professor at the University of Houston, and it was a TEDx. And she tells this story. She has a special now on Netflix, but she tells this story about how that happened and it all came about. And it literally changed her life. She is all about facing, yourself, those around you, with the idea of being vulnerable and it being okay. Courage is not a weakness, right? Is what she talks about. And I think I love how she has podcasts now. She hadn't done them until recently, actually, I think when the pandemic hit. She has other YouTube. She's got the Netflix special, but she's got multiple New York Times bestselling books. And I go back to them constantly because I feel that the research that she is doing is so applicable to every area of the corporate world, of the artistic world, etc. And I find myself thinking, how can I impact people the way that she is? How can I be the best version of myself to share that with the next generation or my peers even? And so I have contemplated writing a book recently. Philip and I have talked about writing a book together, but then just a book myself, and I do not consider myself a writer at all, but I thought, I have this information. I'd love to at least get it down. But then what if I did, some type of masterclass online, as you talk about? I worry that it desensitizes the idea of connection. But, with everything that's going on, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I've definitely considered it. And I want to be able to get out there because I believe more people, it's not for me about having my voice or my face out there, right? It's about sharing information, experiences that can be related to. There's a great playwright, Edward Albee, that said in an interview, and I use this for class all the time, a great play is one that when you go into a theater and you sit down in the audience, it's as though the actors are holding a mirror up and you are seeing your life reflected. That is what great art does, is that it's a reflection of your life. And you walk away thinking, either A, thinking, wow, I was so impacted by this story because I can relate to it, or B, I was able to escape the world around me that's going on and be transformed and affected in a way that brought me hope and encouragement, whatever the case may be. And so, sorry, I got long-winded, but just the idea of sharing the arts in some way, shape, or form, it is exciting. And for me, teaching these master classes, you can, and as you were there, Travis, my passion for art, for people, comes out, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to desensitize it. So if I can find a way to do that via online, then great. If I can't, then I'll stick to, I don't know, still doing it in person, I guess.
And so there's a chance that, our listeners, some of them have either a background or a strong interest in theater, and they're never really going to have the chance to probably get to see you in person for one of these courses. Is there like a top 5, bullet points you would say to them to either look into or you would want to have them hear?
Specifically for going into theater, or
well, this podcast, Creatives Incorporated, is really about all creative. So if they can more broadly, apply to a photographer, a designer, a videographer,
yes.
a painter, wonderful. But I know your thoughts are more streamlined toward theater. But I think anyone could probably find value in them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the first thing is, you will probably be faced with fear, right? Like, we are afraid to take a chance. So many of us, we sometimes are frozen in it. And my advice to you, the first thing is always take the fear with you and do it afraid, is what I tell my students. Because if you don't take it with you, it means you just don't do it. And so you have to be willing to take a chance and have faith, or whatever it is your mantra is, this idea of basically going for it. You need to be willing to do that. One of the others is having courage. Courage is so important. So whether you're a photographer, an artist, a theater person, practitioner, etc., courage and being willing to put yourself out there, right? And what I mean by that is, we as human beings were designed to connect with other human beings. It's just the way we were created. And I believe it's so important that we let go of these walls that we have up to really open ourselves up to genuine connection. And I think that regardless of what area you're in, I think that that's information that can be applied across the board. I'm going to use you and I, Travis. I mean, I don't know how much of this you remember, but Travis and I didn't really like him the first time I met him. This is, almost over 20 years ago now. We've been friends. But Travis, it was me being some, stupid high school kid, honestly. It was, and I've become so ingrained in both, we both have in each other's lives, because we value genuine connection. We care about each other. There was a time, it was either last year or year before last, Travis and I, we were, I'm talking to the listeners, obviously, we were both sick. And I remember thinking, I ended up getting better a little bit before Travis did. I think we both either had the flu or something, but I remember just saying, hey, to myself, I need to check on Travis. I need to make sure he's doing okay. Even if it's just a text, a phone call. I am that person. And I get that not everybody can be that way, but people value that. They value that you genuinely care. And so my advice to all creatives out there is be genuine. It's so important in a world that we live in today that you're not fake. Don't put on this facade, because here's the deal. Like, you'll get hired once based on this fakeness, but then they're going to see who you really are, and you won't get hired again. I am all about the idea of continuous work, right? But more so continuous connection. And you've got to be willing to do that. You've got to be willing to put yourself out there and have the courage to do it, which kind of tied in to a little bit of everything. And then the last thing, I think the three things, and the last one that I always tell my students, is learn from your failures, right? I was very fortunate, and I genuinely mean that, fortunate to fail one of the classes in college that I needed to have to graduate, and it forced me to stay an extra year in college, which meant another like $30,000 worth of debt I was gonna have to for one class. I was so frustrated at the time. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because I learned so much in that next year. I grew up. And sometimes when life throws you this curveball, or you yourself throw you this curveball of like, hey, I have failed at this, you have one of two decisions. You can either mope and sit in it and be like, blame somebody else, or you can take responsibility for it, learn from it, and grow and be stronger. And now I am where I am today. That professor that when I failed myself in that class and she gave me that grade, she's become one of my biggest advocates. She is my mentor. And there was a moment when I was working at another university, I brought her in to be a costume designer for the show. And I remember her sitting next to me on opening night and her looking at me with tears in her eyes and saying, I'm so proud of you. That is one of the greatest moments of my life, because I learned from the failure that I had, and I persevered, and I'm very successful in my own right. To some big Broadway star, I'm probably, a nobody, but to so many students' lives that I've impacted, I'm somebody. And I am somebody because I learned from those failures, those mistakes, and I grew, and that, and then of course the other things of, I am a genuine human being. I have a heart for people and for the art that we create, and so, yeah, those are kind of the things. Hopefully that gives some people some encouragement and some hope, again, regardless of the area that you're in.
That is good stuff, man. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So as we wrap up, I just want to say it's been great having you on the podcast, Joe. Where can the listeners find you and your work?
Yeah, so you can find me on, I have for my director performer website, you can reach me at joemhernandez.com, or you can find my company at thejmhmedia.com. And please reach out, if you have any questions. I love connecting with people. I'm on all the social medias, so, don't hesitate to try and find me on there. It's Joe M. Hernandez, M as in Matthew. And yeah, I've been excited. I really appreciate you, asking me to be on this. It's been great. I look forward to, maybe doing it again in the future on something else. But thanks for including me in this.
Would love it. Thanks so much, buddy. And to find out more about creativesincorporated.com, you will find all of our episodes there, as well as information about upcoming guests. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time.